Welcome to Slow Wine Guide 2021. I'm here with John Olney, Chief Operating Officer and winemaker at Lytton Springs for Ridge Vineyards here in Sonoma. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
It's really, really great to have you here. So you're gonna kick us off today with a quick snapshot of what's happening at Lytton Springs and where you folks are at right at this moment in time.
Sure. So here at Lytton Springs, we're just outside the town of Healdsburg in Sonoma County, and this is our northern outpost. We have two wineries, and here at Lytton Springs, we are a winery that we built in 1999, and it is a winery dedicated just to our production of Zinfandel-based wines, which we've been producing going all the way back to the 1960s, where Ridge was one of the first producers ever to make single vineyard wines from old vines, Zinfandel vineyards throughout California. Most of the wines we make here are based here in Sonoma County, and they come from vineyards which we've been working with for many decades. The Geyserville, which is one of the wines we'll taste here, is a wine we started making back in 1966. And the Lytton Springs, where this winery was built right in the middle of the vineyard, is a wine we started making back in 1972.
Wow, I've seen those beautiful old head-trained Zinfandel wines that are around the winery, and you don't forget that site. They're gorgeous.
Yeah, they really are. They're beautiful vines. There's a lot of heritage, a lot of history tied up in them. These are vineyards, for example, at Lytton Springs, which was originally planted going all the way back to the turn of the last century, so around 1900, between 1900 and 1910. So these are vines that are well over 100 years old, done in sort of the old Goblet head-trained fashion, no wire, dry farmed and low producing, all organically farmed, and really definitely a major factor in the quality of the wines that we're able to produce here.
Is Lytton Springs part of the Heritage program? The Heritage?
Yeah, we're part of it. We're classified as a Heritage Vineyard, as is Geyserville as well.
Great, fantastic. So, in the vineyard, you've told us that the vines are taking care of themselves practically, right? They're dry farmed, they're low yielding, they're very balanced. How are you farming these ancient old vines?
So we began the conversion of all of our vineyards up here in Sonoma to organic certification over 10 years ago. Obviously, the vineyards that are up on the hillsides are more difficult to convert, but we are down to less than 5%, which are in the process of certification. So we will be 100% certified within 2 years from now. And the vines are, we do just nothing but cover crop. We mow. We only use organic fungicides such as sulfur and copper. Everything is harvested by hand. When you're not on wires, mechanical harvesting isn't really even an option. And one of the things we do as well at Ridge is we like to carry it even in terms of trying to be transparent, even into the winery. And on all of our labels, ever since the 2011 vintage, if you look on the back of the label, you'll actually see an ingredients list, because a lot of people don't realize, but in wine, in most parts of the world, certainly in the United States, you're allowed to put any number of additives in without actually saying that. You don't have to list ingredients. We choose to list ingredients just to let you know that really, all we're putting in there are the grapes. It's natural yeast. Obviously, you're going to have the malolactic bacteria, which is also natural, and we use some SO2, but outside of that, we're not adding any outside agents into the wine.
Well, that's good to know, and it's that level of transparency is unusual in the industry, so kudos to you for doing that. I know consumers really benefit and appreciate from it. We're seeing some movement on the European front toward ingredient labeling.
Yeah, I just saw a recent posting actually. I think I don't know if it was throughout Europe or it was just in France where they're talking about making ingredients a requirement.
Yeah, I think I personally embrace that, but
It makes a lot of sense if you think about it. You know, if you buy a package of canned tuna or even pasta, then you look on the back and there's the ingredients. So why
yeah,
not?
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so I am so thrilled that you have a timeline for 100% organic certification. Congratulations. That's a
Yeah,
milestone.
and we didn't know this actually until we were we were notified of it by the county. But we're actually the largest organic farmers in both Sonoma County and also in the Santa Cruz Mountains where we farm and produce our Montebello wine.
Yeah. I teach at Cabrillo in the wine studies
Oh, you
program.
do?
Not
Oh,
every
okay.
semester, but quite often.
Yeah,
Quite often.
great.
Yeah, so I'm more familiar now with the growers in Santa Cruz than I've ever been. All right,
Yeah, great.
great. So are we going to talk wine? Let's do it.
Sure,
All right.
absolutely.
So we've got the Ridge 2018 Geyserville.
So yeah, this is the 2018 Geyserville. So the Geyserville and the Lytton Springs are the two Zinfandels which we've been producing for the longest amount of time. As I mentioned before, Geyserville goes all the way back to 1966. And this is a vineyard, it's in the Alexander Valley AVA. And it's a beautiful old lines vineyard, which is a classic example of what we in California we call a field blend, which is to say that vineyards that were planted over 100 years old, they didn't plant them the way that we plant them today. In today's world, we plant these vineyards as a single varietal. So you have, for example, a Pinot Noir vineyard, which will be 100% Pinot Noir. Back 100 years ago, they were doing it differently. And what they were trying to accomplish was to sort of blend the wine in the vineyard. And in order to do that, they would mix different grape varietals. So when you go out into the Geyserville vineyard, you will see about 65, 70% will be Zinfandel, but you will also have other varietals like Carignan, like Petit Syrah, which are interplanted. And the idea was to sort of like a cook chooses different ingredients, they would choose different varietals to complement each other. And then we harvest those at the same time, we co-ferment them, and we really feel we get a better result by the co-fermentation than if we were to try to pick out those separate varietals and then combine them later.
Well, so it's really a beautiful lineup here. We've got Zinfandel, Carignan, some Petit Syrah, and some Alicante Bouschet.
Yep.
And it's interesting. I'm just writing about Alicante Bouschet in Portugal.
Yeah, you see it. You will see it. It pops up here and there throughout vineyards around the world. It was actually a hybrid varietal which was developed by a French viticulturist named Boucher, and he added his name to it. And it was really chosen, specifically for color. So it's something in very, very small amounts, which really adds to the color, but you have to be careful with it because it's a fairly dominant varietal.
Right. So is it a tincture? Is it a pink flesh variety? Yes.
Yes, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so it's dark skin to start with, and then the pulp and the juice is also red. So it's a lot of color.
Lots of anthocyanin. But when you look at this, wine, clearly it's not over extracted. It's in this small pour I have. It's still medium plus intensity. So it's not opaque. And there's such a freshness to this wine that is so marked for, Alexander Valley. We can ripen cab up there. So
it's there's no question about it. California is, of course, a fairly warm region, and especially with Zinfandel. Zinfandel is a grape varietal which, if you leave it out in the sun long enough, it develops a lot of sugar, which translates into wines which can be very heady, can be fairly alcoholic. And at Ridge, that's something which Paul Draper, who was our winemaker here for decades, was really, we really try to focus on making wines that are balanced. We're not trying to over extract. We're not trying to sort of win the biggest is best kind of contest. We're making wines which we think should have some elegance, which should not be too alcoholic, which should maintain some nice acidity, which is where that nice vibrancy and freshness in the wine is coming from.
And I just love that there's Carignan in there, those old Carignan vines.
Yep.
Really just magic, just add magic to the blend.
Yeah, Carignan is a really, really terrific grape. I mean, it's usually used as a blending grape, but it's a grape in a warm weather that really maintains its acidity, and it ripens at lower sugar. So it helps to kind of balance out the higher sugar in the Zinfandel.
That's what we like. We like to know those secrets about the blenders. Ripens at lower sugar.
That's the magic.
Fantastic. So I can picture myself in Geyserville in this vineyard. And how big is this vineyard, John?
The vineyard is just about 35 acres.
35 acres. All right.
It's all alluvial soil near the Russian River, and well drained, all head trained, as I mentioned, and that field blend with lots of Carignan in it, as you mentioned.
Loving it. Absolutely loving it. Loving it. Loving it. Okay, so now the Lytton Springs.
Yeah, so Lytton Springs, again, another one of our single vineyard Zinfandels that not very far from Geyserville, actually just about 2 miles away. It moves from the Alexander Valley over to the Dry Creek Valley, which of course is one of the legendary areas for growing Zinfandel. Again, very old vines. What changes when you get over to Lytton Springs is that field blend that we're talking about, whereas Carignan is probably the most prominent secondary varietal over at Geyserville. At Lytton Springs, there's a lot more clay in the soil, so they planted much more Petite Syrah, which does well in clay soils. And Petite Syrah is a grape which really lends a lot of depth, darkness, lots of color, more tannin. So it's a wine that has darker sort of fruit, more plum fruit. It's a wine with a little more structure to it, especially when it's young, maybe a little earthier in overall character. Really, I think you see the similarities in terms of being Zinfandel based from the Geyserville, but you move towards, sort of in a way towards more of a Bordeaux style wine here. And this is a wine that Zinfandel typically is a grape, because of its fruit and its exuberance, is a wine that, or a grape that can be consumed fairly young, and doesn't tend to improve that much with age. With the Lytton Springs, this is wines which we pulled out at 15, 20 years, and it's just a beautiful expression of a well-aged wine. So it really has the potential for those who want to, look at it over a longer period to age really, really well.
Yeah, the wine has an excellent track record of holding up well in the cellar. I had the distinct pleasure of tasting a vertical of some older vintages several years ago, and unforgettable experience that was. But this 17 was not a rebound vintage, so the 17 crop was a little bit smaller.
17 crop was a little bit smaller. It was a little challenging in the sense that it was a pretty warm vintage. So like we were saying, in terms of trying to make a wine which is not going to be too ripe and yet maintains that balance and elegance, we had to be really, really careful. And we really also had to be very, very quick in terms of logistics of getting out there and getting the grapes picked before they became overripe.
Right.
That's
so your
one of the
picking
things
decision had to be timed very carefully.
Had to be right on.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I see that the wine is 14.8, but certainly in the glass, very balanced, no heat of any kind.
Yeah.
I guess my question for you, though, with regard to this wine is the oak regime, because clearly when you have a wine that has significantly more condensed tannin, you're matching that with a more robust, possibly, oak regime. So talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so Ridge, I mean, one of the things that's unique to start out with in terms of our program here at Ridge is that going all the way back to the late 60s and early 70s, Paul Draper, who was a winemaker at the time, did a lot of experimentation with oaks from all over the world, from Slovakia, from France, from Austria, and also from the United States. And through lots of blind tastings, he really came to the conclusion that American oak actually had lots of potential, as much potential as anywhere else in the world. And he really gravitated towards American oak and really started working with Coopers here in the Midwest of the United States to develop oak barrels from certain forests that really matched our wine. So Ridge has a long history of using American oak, which we still do today. So that's one difference right there. As far as Zinfandel goes, compared, for example, to the Montebello, which we'll taste, which is, of course, Cabernet based, we tend to use around 15 to 20% new oak. Anything more than that tends to sort of begins to kind of interfere with the fruit of the Zinfandel. So that's the general program.
Great. Well, it's good to know that that's all fine-tuned.
Yep.
for our drinking pleasure, our enjoyment. Absolutely. Okay. So now the 2016 Ridge Montebello, that's got a few years in the bottle here, got a little bottle age on it.
It does. Still a very young wine. This of course is our wine from the Montebello vineyard up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, ranging anywhere from 17 all the way up to 2,600 feet elevation. Most of the Montebello comes from the upper elevation blocks, and Cabernet based with, of course, Merlot and some Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc also possibly included in any given year. And this is a wine which really, this is where Ridge really started. This is when the original founders of Ridge, going all the way back to 1959, first made a small amount of wine from this vineyard. They didn't have much background in wine, and yet they were just really blown away by the quality. And that's really where Ridge got its start. And then we've developed that vineyard over decades to where we are today. And it's a wine that first and foremost is unique in terms of where it's grown. Most people can naturally think of Cabernet and you associate it with Napa, which is a much warmer climate. The Santa Cruz Mountains, south of San Francisco, way up in the mountains, looking out almost 15 miles away from the Pacific Ocean, has a much more cooling effect on the vineyard. So it's a cooler region. We're able to get maturity at lower sugars. So our wines tend to be more in the 13% alcohol range with really nice acidity, beautiful balance. And it's a wine that really, really is built to age. And this is a wine that I think really starts to just open up after 10 years, and it's something which can be enjoyed over a 30 to 40 year period. It's really one of the great wines of the world.
As your collectors can attest to that, there's an incredible savoriness to this wine that strikes me. It's a marker that I find every single time. And it's always there, and it's far more complex than tobacco, but there's a tobacco savoriness that it's just so appealing that I know, is not 100% attributed to oak.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. There's an incredible complexity to it. There's a tobacco, almost like a pine tar, coffee, these torrefaction, these kind of things, which is also mixed in with some of the vanilla from the new oak when it's young. So those are all sort of intermingling in its youth, and then they kind of come together and sort of become much more united, right? Like I said, at that kind of a 10-year period, and then just to continue to evolve. And then as they do, the tannins soften. So texturally, you start getting more and more of the wine opening up, and it's really it's an amazing experience to really follow one of these wines over many years and just see how it opens up and evolves.
And see how those tannins polymerize. Well, the 16 right now, there's there's a firmness to the finish, but not an astringency or a bitterness, just a nice, firm kind of closure to the finish there, that says it's accessible, but it will stand up to just about anything you can throw at it for sure. So
yeah, no, the 16 was really an incredible wine in terms of concentration, but the tannins and the color really combined so well that you can sense that this is a concentrated, this is a big wine, but the tannins are very well coated, so you're not getting any of that astringency.
Yeah, they're very polymerized and very beautiful. So I'm gonna take this bottle and I'm gonna decant it and let it get a breath, kind of advance it a little bit, oxygenate it a little bit, and taste it throughout the day and see how it evolves. I think it might be the lunch wine.
Yep, absolutely. No,
I don't know if that poses for the afternoon, but
well, I think you'll enjoy it.
oh, there's no question about that. But it's nice to kind of follow the wine's evolution as it breathes and it opens up over a period of 24 hours to up to, you know, sometimes 2 days to see where it goes. What is this appetite for oxygen over a period of 2 days?
Absolutely, no. And when it's young like that, frequently we find it's even better on the second day. I mean, with the extra air.
Exactly. It can take a lot of exposure to oxygen. It's got a massive appetite for oxygen.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such a treat to taste with you, John. Thank you so much for joining Slow Wine this morning, sharing, giving us a little window into your world there in Sonoma, and sharing some of this beautiful juice with us. Greatly appreciated. So
oh, it's been nice to be with you.
Absolutely. Great. You know what I realized I didn't do, John?